A massive thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Stick around for a special offer that will save you 83% on an account with 3 extra months free. I'll admit, when booting up Hitman 3 for the first time, the overwhelming feeling wasn't the happiness or excitement that you'd expect diving into the newly released sequel to one of my now favourite game series of all time. Instead, it was apprehension. For one, the game's launch itself didn't exactly fill me with joy. An utterly botched affair stemming from the game's shift to several different platforms at once, with each bringing their own infuriating sets of problems. Essentially, for a game so centred on its status as an ever-evolving platform for players to buy into, so little heed was paid to how progress would carry over between Steam and Epic, for example. A problem only compounded by the series' ever-confusing, always-online approach that I decided to hold off on playing until I could be sure that my progress and unlocks weren't just going to be wiped. This was far from the best first impression of the finale of this World of Assassination trilogy I had come to love so dearly. Even when I did get into the game a day or two later, however, my concern went beyond mere technical frustrations. Nothing about Hitman 3's rocky launch did anything to stop the tidal wave of demands for a follow-up to my now numerous videos on the series. And while I'm definitely glad people seem to like those videos, there was suddenly a lot of pressure on me. I worried about what would be left to say about these games. You know, it's a given now that Hitman has amazing level and mission design, so will Hitman 3's missions really showcase enough of an evolution to warrant an entire new piece? Well, thankfully for me, and I guess you, now that I'm here, countless hours and playthrough after playthrough of each mission later, I'm practically bursting with stuff to talk about. And upon first glance, that shift in perspective might seem a little odd. I mean, the core mechanical experience of Hitman remains largely unchanged from the second game, where environmental elements like foliage were emphasised to allow for more straight-ahead stealth beyond merely relying on disguises, the usefulness of which was already greatly limited. Thanks to the sheer size and functional diversity of the different buildings within these maps, there were very few examples of what I call skeleton key costumes to be utilised here. Finding one disguise that could work anywhere simply wouldn't make a whole lot of sense in these environments. On a purely anecdotal level, I guess surveillance camera placement seems a whole lot more frequent than in 2, but the simplicity of dealing with them hasn't changed. In one of the more immediately noticeable introductions, the game gives you a camera of your own. It's just that outside of a couple of key locations and story beats, the hacking abilities it allows for didn't make my life that much easier. So with all this stuff that's the same, what is it about Hitman 3's maps that makes the game stand out as its own entity? Well, Hitman 3 isn't trying to reinvent the wheel by adding a ton of new systems and features. Instead, the game places itself very firmly as the conclusion of its trilogy as opposed to an all-out sequel, a culmination of years of developer knowledge and experience with this platform rather than a complete alteration. In what feels like a throwback to the release of 2016's game, you could think of 3 as the final episode of Hitman, one that allows the developers to make subtle tweaks to previously established systems to get players approaching targets in ways they might not have considered before. It lets the developers showcase their rightfully earned confidence working within the modern Hitman formula, presenting what, to fans of this series, might be some of the most gratifying sets of challenges yet. And these are challenges I will tell you all about after a quick message from today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN, or virtual private network, that keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all data sent between your device and the internet. Not only does this help to provide peace of mind that your privacy is safe while browsing online, helping to protect against unwanted surveillance from big companies and cyber criminals, especially if you're using free public Wi-Fi, it also allows you to bypass geographic content restrictions by essentially changing what country you're accessing the internet from. I'm sure most of us have been in the situation where you've heard about a film or show being released on Netflix or other streaming service, seen everyone getting excited about it online, only to find that the release is limited to a certain region. With Surfshark, it's literally a couple of clicks and you can access whatever you want, arbitrary restrictions be damned. It's simple, really fast, reliable, and it means I can watch Twin Peaks whenever the mood takes me. What's not to like? What's more, Surfshark is offering Writing on Games viewers a special offer. If you head to the link in the description below and use my offer code GAMES at checkout, you'll save 83% with 3 extra months free. Surfshark allows one account to be used across multiple devices, and offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it out for yourself. Once again, click the link in the description and use the code GAMES at checkout to take advantage of this great offer, which really helps the channel to boot. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and now back to why the challenges in Hitman 3's maps are so gratifying. See, normally I would open up one of these videos with a discussion of the game's tutorial level. My video on 2 posited that the robustness of 2016's tutorial, having you essentially play through 4 separate missions to get a grip on how these systems work, made its sequel's opening mission, focused primarily on introducing foliage and the heightened threat of cameras, feel like a bit of a damp squib. You know, the real meat of the game begins in Miami. You've just got to eat your weird beach-shaped vegetables to get there. In Hitman 3, however, no such complaint applies, because there is no tutorial level. The devs fully commit to the notion that, hey, there are 2 full games to be played before this, you know. Hitman 3 seems to cater to longtime fans the most. As dazzling as the new maps are on their own, I can definitely see new players feeling the stress of option paralysis a bit here. This is because one of the most significant changes between titles, as I see it, is that the mission stories that would previously help alleviate some of that indecision have been drastically reduced in this third installment, or at least the ones you can simply pick from a menu. These opportunities themselves, the Rube Goldberg-esque web of systems you interact with to take out your target in some absurd over-the-top way, are still present here. I mean, as I'll get to, certain stories here have become downright iconic. There's just often little pointing you towards them, with maybe 2 or 3 stories per level max. In some missions, it might seem as if there aren't any at all, and so you'll pick up little bits of info from NPC dialogue. The markers you do find might seem a little more vague than in prior titles. They may get you to a certain point along the path towards killing your target, but won't always provide you the same kind of serendipitous, logic-defying moment where said target will arbitrarily demand their bodyguards leave them alone in a room with several convenient places to dump a body and a dude with a barcode on the back of his head. It's this kind of move on the part of the developers that really suggests you should probably have an idea of what Hitman is at this stage. This is a game that revolves around your ability to analyze and mess with clockwork AI patterns to get to your target, just as it's a game about those interactions going wrong, those systems going haywire and you having to deal with the consequences, improvising to wrestle back some control over the situation. I've maintained that the best way to play Hitman, at least on a first run, is to give yourself over to the chaos of unguided exploration before going back and playing out the stories. Because, well, the opportunities are fun, but you can watch them on YouTube and get largely the same effect. The developers have trained you for up to 5 years to value the wild moments that come from your own gameplay as much as any scripted event, and now they get to utilise the experience gained through that time to provide some of the most varied spaces they can in order to facilitate those gloriously chaotic moments. And to be clear up front, not all of the missions here are hits. Given that this is the conclusion of the world of Assassination, there's also an overarching narrative to be wrapped up here, one that certain levels and set pieces rigidly stick to in a way that to me goes against the strength of the franchise. We'll get onto that though. Generally though, the developers' approach to level design here simply allow them to put their best foot forward. There's a real ambition surging through almost all of these locations, and importantly, a trust in the players to let us find the best stuff ourselves. I think Hitman 3 is a fantastic game whose maps, in the context of the rest of the franchise, see the developers send off the world of Assassination in impressive style. And style really is the name of the game here when you dive into the game's first level, Dubai. One of the things I don't think Hitman has gotten enough credit for over the years is the really great visual design of its levels. As a result of the uncanniness at the heart of so many of the game's systems, you know, people don't really act like people in these games as much as AI clusters. I guess one of the prevailing things that stands out about Hitman is how goofy it can look at times. But that's a testament to how carefully crafted these environments actually are, that their visual splendor doesn't distract from the action you're here for. It merely amplifies that feeling of mischief when you're performing these wacky feats in such palatial environments. Well, in Dubai, the developers are finally taking the opportunity to grab you by the eyeballs and demand gaze upon the grandeur of what we've created. Thanks to the lack of any need of a tutorial, Dubai is finally the explosive intro the series deserves, as 47 and ally Lucas Gray plunge onto the glorious skyscraper below, and you're greeted immediately by this tapestry that sets you up perfectly for the atmosphere of the level ahead. It's as if you set foot into an oil painting. The otherworldly waves of clouds surrounding you are at once ominous and imposing, with odd angular shapes jutting out from below. These weird ornaments topping the surrounding skyscrapers are so astronomically high up that the plebs on the ground wouldn't be able to see them bursting through through the cloud layer, and yet you get to look down on them from on high. Such is the opulence of the level you're about to enter here, going above and beyond the entrances to even the game's most regal party levels. People aren't meant to be here, but here you are. But all of this is contrasted by the black plumes of smoke from the oil fields billowing in the distance, slowly but surely corrupting the sky around you, a grim reminder of what kinds of dealings likely paid for the building you're standing on, that the golden shimmer of it all is but a sham. All of this from the opening shot of the game, with the visual designers managing to pack in everything that makes up the thematic core of Hitman, infiltrating the world of the wealthy and making them pay for the deceit and corruption within. And if it seems like I've talked about visuals for a long time, it's because more than any other map in this trilogy, Dubai sees the game take a cinematic turn it previously hasn't, with the once purely functional camera now being dragged out to dramatic effect to let you know just how high up you actually are. A toolbox is placed in just the right spot as to be almost inevitably knocked over into the vast unknown below, and the camera lets you know this. The action only stops for a brief second as you enter the building, a quick introduction to your own digital camera that allows you to hack certain electronic panels. That's it, now the game camera can be pushed right up close as you make your way through the steel pipes leading to the main hall. I mean, this building is so grand, there's so much money within these walls that even its air vents are utterly pristine, practically shimmering, and this proceeds to build up to the point at which you enter the level proper, where playing into the James Bond influence that clearly defines the series in a major way, a dramatic swoop of the curtains sees 47 effortlessly ditch his skydiving suit in favour of a much more suave, sophisticated number, and no one around you bats an eyelid. Now, usually I would have a real problem with Hitman starting up with a segment so regimented. I mean, half the fun in Hitman is trying to work your way into these places and frantically scramble for a disguise to fit in, right? Surely there's something about the scripted nature of all this stuff that goes against the player-driven chaos that has come to form the game's identity, right? Well, you see, all of this is designed to get you to that moment as you climb the stairs, guided by deferent servers. And as the light of the sun starts to peek over the stairs, the camera pans out once again to let you bask in the enormity of the truly open-ended playground that's now before you. God, there's just such a swagger to this intro that I can't help but love so much. There's really nothing rigid about Dubai. Now you're here, the game just says go nuts. And thankfully the devs do throw new players a bone in the form of a fairly obvious main story at one of the info terminals to the side of the main stage. And it's an enjoyable romp at that, seeing you navigate every aspect of this building's makeup, from the narrow corridors of the service quarters, the maintenance and security areas on the upper floors, before hacking your way to yet another dramatic camera pull as you reach the penthouse. As I say, there might not be an overt tutorial to be found here, but this mission story definitely gives you an idea of what kinds of structures and potential secrets you might want to look out for in future playthroughs. Tying back into the level's focus on visual details, you could argue that this is a means of training players to be more observant than they might be in normal games where replayability isn't so encouraged, as it's now possible to glean information such as vault or door codes from post-it notes and whiteboard scrawls just laying around. There's so much in this map that's just left for you to find yourself, with the aforementioned mission story hinting at what kinds of things you could look out for. And it's all under the guidance of your pal Lucas on the radio, gloriously hamming up his performance to ludicrous degrees, as the character speaks of getting his revenge on the partners, just a few steps away from manic villainous cackling. But despite all this excess, what's staggering is just how coherent the whole layout is here, and how that coherency directly relates to the methods you use in order to navigate your way up this tower. You could veer towards the disguise side of things, fully immersing yourself in the world of the wealthy, stabbing people in the back to take their place and using social engineering to work your way up the ranks to your target. That, or you could go the route of the working man, taking the far less glamorous role of the crew in the back toiling to hold this event together, just as the scaffolding running up the centre of the map holds the building together, scaffolding that allows you to take the more direct, physical approach to your ascent. And while the size of this map might be emphasised by cinematic framing, Dubai still feels eminently manageable. Within a couple of playthroughs, I felt like I knew the layout like the back of my hand, and yet every time I go back I end up improvising a completely completely different combination of routes and methods to achieve my goal. It's grand and varied enough to feel like I'm playing a different level every time. And it's with this excess dripping from every corner of this map, from the voice acting to the secrets packed in that the game tells you nothing about, that the more regimented build up to the level itself is easily excusable, because it's a rigidity that the rest of the level completely shirks off. Like, the developers give you the opportunity to off both of your targets and leave within seconds of starting the mission if you're good enough. That's the kind of patience and attention that IO is really rewarding with Dubai, indicative of a complete trust in and expectation of its players to really take in their surroundings and use whatever observations they come up with to their advantage. Because with this map, whatever you think you might want to try, the developers likely have you covered. God, Dubai is a hell of an opening salvo for Hitman 3 to be sure, and luckily this is a momentum that for many, the game more than carries over into its next map, DARTMOOR. DARTMOOR is a map that, like Sapienza and Miami before it, many Hitman fans seem to be viewing as the new icon of the series, and on its face, it's not exactly apparent why. It's not a particularly massive or vibrant map, there's not some big party going on or anything that would see you navigating huge crowds as you do in some of Hitman's most memorable locations. In fact, it's a somber occasion. The atmosphere is funereal, quite literally. There's not many people about. The ones that are present complain that they're stuck in the middle of nowhere in rural England and that there's not a whole lot to do. So how does a map as bleak as this stack up against Hitman's best for so many? Well, lining up with a seemingly increased interest in Agatha Christie-style detective fiction of late, as seen with the success of films like Knives Out, the thing that's so gripping people about Dartmoor is fully encompassed in one of its very few mission stories: means, motive and opportunity. In other words, get ready 47, there's a murder that needs a solving. It's a complicated story. So in the first mission you took out two of the partners of an organisation called Providence, a shadowy Illuminati-esque cabal, and your search for the third brings you to England, where Alexa Carlyle, who just escaped your clutches in Dubai, is now laying low, staging her funeral in the hopes that she can buy some time to tie up any loose ends. In the midst of this elaborate sham ceremony which brings together her unwitting family members, a spanner is thrown in the works as Alexa's brother Zachary has been killed in the middle of the night, forcing her to hire a private detective in order to investigate without drawing too much attention to proceedings. And that, finally, is where you come in. You've got to kill Alexa and get the case file that she has on Arthur Edwards, the Constant of Providence, and the one who similarly got away from you at the end of the second game. Of course you can play this map as you would any other level, taking out the target the old-fashioned way and working your way up to the top floor, solving puzzle clues to gain access to the case file, but when that prompt appears over the detective's head, how are you going to resist taking that role for yourself? In what is a pretty dramatic shift in the structure of a Hitman mission, you're now tasked with going around different rooms using your camera to scan and pick up items in the environment, building a picture of what really happened here. And for a task that's mechanically this simple, the multiple twists and turns in how this case can shake out, and the ways in which you can use these outcomes to your advantage are pretty impressive. It almost turns the game into a branching point-and-click adventure, where your main weapon is dialogue of all things, taking statements and collecting alibis from the key players. What's more, it's a surprisingly compelling and well-written little mystery, a winding web of a decades-long power struggle between siblings, replete with long-lost letters to be found within secret passages behind bookcases, in a fashion that both plays to the strengths of Hitman's best, most interconnected maps, as well as staying delightfully true to its literary influences. The truth of the case is equally as elaborate as its setup, with Alexa's daughter-in-law actually turning out to be her niece, the illegitimate child of Montgomery, Alexa's older brother and heir to the Carlyle legacy, whom she conspired with Zachary to murder decades prior in order to take that power for herself, with Emma, the niece, marrying into the family without anyone's knowledge of her true identity, I guess technically marrying her brother and having a kid as part of a long con so that she could then get revenge on Zachary by poisoning him. And depending on how much evidence you collect throughout your investigation, you get a number of choices as to who to blame. Pinning it on the butler, for example, allows enough room for the niece to poison Alexa too, and in one of the more grim choices, you can go a different route and convince Alexa that Zachary took his own life, unable to carry the guilt of Montgomery's murder, which itself leads to Alexa jumping off a balcony. And of course, the cruel irony running through all these options is that, as set out in in Montgomery's letter, he was going to give his power up to Alexa anyway. No one needed to die here. Now on a gameplay level, this neat little narrative features a twist on one of the most unique and one of my personal favourite mission stories ever from Mumbai in Hitman 2, with 47 judging the handiwork of a fellow killer and having someone else take care of the target for him, in this case even the target themselves. And that opportunity where Alexa is poisoned by her niece only occurs if you wait long enough past the prime opportunity presented to you to push her off the balcony yourself. There's so much scope to the way this story can play out, and crucially it's all in your hands. And as a bonus, 47's witty murder euphemisms fit far better here than they did in Hitman 2 because, well, this is a mission about a murder rather than just taking someone on a house tour. To be clear though, none of this is a particularly challenging way to play this mission. The detective disguise is pretty much the one true skeleton key in the game, allowing you the ability to explore anywhere you choose, with an easily accessible master key that unlocks every door other than the greenhouse. And ultimately, as with most murder detective fiction, once the whodunit has been solved, or in this instance, once all the outcomes have been exhausted, there's not a whole lot of reason to go back and collect all the clues again. And so, outside of the couple of other fun mission stories, my subsequent runs of Dartmoor mainly felt like I was playing an old level from 2016's game. Eliminate one simple target, get the case file from the safe if you're going the direct route, I mean the safe code never changes, then make your way back out. There's nothing wrong with this per se, and part of me likes the simplicity of it all. It's just that a lot of room was clearly made to accommodate this mystery as the main style of play here. Sure, the grey skies, crumbling architecture, and crows circling above swampy marshland, stretching endlessly into the distance, provide an atmosphere so thick that it's just a joy to wander these grounds. But the fact it's so sprawling, so out in the middle of nowhere, means that there really aren't that many obstacles in your way, even without the detective disguise. Guards are spread out surprisingly thin, and as the detective himself observes, the manor is a security nightmare, with all sorts of potential entrances and vulnerabilities, meaning that getting around isn't that much of a problem. I definitely appreciate the attention to detail in just how many grabbable pipes and ledges there are to be exploited here. Weirdly though, with the access afforded to the detective and the myriad ways you can maneuver around, obtaining the suit-only silent assassin challenge on Dartmoor offered disappointingly little in the way of, well, challenge. Dartmoor is still a really great level, which shows just how left field the developers are willing to go with these mechanics and systems they've mastered over the course of the trilogy. The murder mystery isn't just a gimmick, it's elaborate in a way that I didn't expect. It's just that now I've seen what it has to offer, there are probably other maps I'd pick first before stepping into the grim English marsh one more time. With all of that said, 47 now has some raving to do. Let's head to Berlin. Of course, 47's goal here isn't to relax as much as he's probably earned it. After the rather tumultuous events following the conclusion of Dartmoor, abruptly bringing an end to the burgeoning bromance between our protagonist and Lucas Gray, and with handler Diana compromised, 47 has been sent in search of Gray's former right hand and apparent hacker extraordinaire Olivia, who supposedly knows what to do, I guess. Again, it's complicated, we'll get onto my thoughts on the story eventually. 47 heads to meet her in Berlin, where he happens upon an eerily quiet petrol station a la Resident Evil 2, leading him down a trail lit only by foggy car lights. He receives a panicked phone call from Olivia, who, having gone to a secret nightclub in the middle of nowhere, alerts 47 that the ICA, his former employer, has sent agents to take them both out. But rather than heeding the advice to retreat, our hero keeps his cool. This is something he's going to sort out himself. Berlin, for my money, is one of the coolest concepts for a mission across all of Hitman. For one, the choice of an exclusive Berlin club based on the real-world, notoriously difficult to get into Berghain, with its unassuming grey, blocky exterior belying the strobing insanity happening inside, plays into everything that makes the tone of Hitman so great. That feeling of making your way into a place you wouldn't normally be able to, skipping the queue with ease just by taking out a nearby guard or something. It's the party level taken to its extreme, with such a large mass of people closely packed together. On its own, this would be enough for a brilliant mission setting. But the idea propping this mission up is even more wild. Contrary to what you might expect, you don't get this slickly animated mission briefing telling you exactly what you've got to do here. For once, 47 is at least partially on the defensive, as you don't know who any of your targets actually are. Once again, this is a mission where the influence of Mumbai from Hitman 2 is keenly felt, as it was here this type of identify the target objective had previously been experimented with. In that level, your objective was a randomly assigned NPC that you had to weed out through scant bits of information. Here though, while the mechanics of identifying who is out to get you are largely the same, just stand close enough to the people you might suspect until a marker appears above their heads, the developers really commit to this idea in a way that, were there to be any other Hitman-esque titles in the works, wink wink, bodes well for future iterations on this mission framework, where your objective isn't as obvious as it normally would be. Part of this is just in the sheer numbers at play here. Previously, you were dealing with maybe 4 targets per mission max. Here, there's 10. You're only required to identify and eliminate half of them in order to complete the mission, but the fact that they're all out there looking for you rather than the other way around certainly adds a layer of tension to proceedings. This is one of the busiest maps in the game, with ICA agents using multiple different types of disguises, and yet even with Hitman vision usually alerting you in bright red exactly where your target is on a map, here there's nothing. There are so many people around, and yet you're totally alone. Of course, it's not impossible to get an idea of who the targets probably are simply by glance alone. The stoic professionalism, hell, the build of an ICA assassin would make someone stick out from the drugged up dancers in a club, or even your run-of-the-mill security, who seem to spend as much time chatting and sleeping as they do paying attention to their surroundings. That, and you can pretty much guarantee someone's status as an assassin when you're perfectly disguised for the area you're in, and yet a roaming staff member or guard can still pick you out. The dot above their head, or the fact that they have some kind of entourage alongside them, usually gives it away. But in a lot of cases, just finding them brings up another issue. How are you going to take them out with so many eyes dotted around the place? These people may be completely off their nut on a whole host of potential intoxicants, but they're apparently still compos mentis enough to alert a guard when they witness a casual garroting. And this brings me on to the second aspect of why I think this map is really great. And please bear with me because I'm going somewhere with it. Trying to plan anything, or even just get around the main club floor itself, can be really goddamn irritating. I don't mean this in terms of the architecture or anything like that. The stark industrial setting presents you a wealth of exposed pipe and ledges for you to Spider-Man your way around the upper floors. There are a lot of options for you here. I mean specifically the NPCs themselves. They're annoying, but crucially in a way that's so true to life that it's actually kind of brilliant. The obnoxiously free-for-all queues for the bars and authentically depressing toilets make for a mass of bodies talking such absolute shite that it not only perfectly represents the experience of being in a club full of dickheads, but also provides a legitimate challenge for navigation. Despite the dense population of the dance floor area, the agents will still spot you more or less immediately, so you have to balance keeping out of their eye line while also trying not to lose them amongst the sea of people getting in your way. There's a cohesion between the authenticity afforded to the club's atmosphere and the way that atmosphere bleeds into your moment-to-moment gameplay, and it speaks to just how great the writing is throughout this level. Because you have to remember, these aren't just nameless, faceless targets here. These are 47's old co-workers in many cases. There's an enjoyable escalation to the discrete story playing out here, as you take an earpiece from one of the agents and listen in real time to their handler getting angrier and angrier, baffled as to how 10 of the best agents in the world can't take down one man before realizing that you're listening in on the whole thing and have them completely rumbled. That said, there's simultaneously a quiet sadness running underneath it all, as 47 identifies a target and just mutters a name under his breath, suggesting but never outright stating a prior passing connection that our protagonist now has to snuff out. It really hammers home just how isolated 47 is here. But for how well crafted the general design of this mission is, there's one lesson the developers seem to have learned about optional objectives in 2 that makes me so goddamn happy on such a deeply spiritual level. That is to say, after a first playthrough, you don't have to go through any of this song and dance again if you don't want to. Take a map like Whittleton Creek for example. As admirable as it was that the game was trying to weave its story into mission objectives rather than just maintaining the usual watch cutscene, kill 2 to 4 people, watch another cutscene approach, the fact you had to separately go to different ends of the map and collect the intel every single time was always a total drain on the excitement of proceedings, as your runs were likely getting more and more daring and absurd alongside your increasing knowledge of how the map worked. Any momentum was always brought to a screeching halt by the reminder that you still had had to perform this mundane and utterly tedious task before you could leave. In Berlin, Dubai before it, and indeed some other missions we'll come on to, the option is available in the planning stage to simply ditch the preamble and get into the mission should you so choose, and the resulting runs are far better for it. And with all the targets identified from the start, the dynamic of the mission shifts back in your favour slightly, as the challenge suddenly becomes one of trying to off every target before they all retreat, your dominance as the world's greatest assassin fully asserted once more. So yeah, I love Berlin, but a lot of people I've talked to seem to think it might be one of the game's weaker maps, and honestly, I can see why that might be. The relative enormity of the challenge ahead of you and the sudden escalation in tension that comes along with it, alongside the fact that there really isn't anything to guide you here. The main areas are all so crowded that it can feel a bit like pulling teeth trying to get a number of these targets out of any kind of prying eye line. Plus, the grey industrial look can leave everything blurring together a bit, the labyrinth of potential pathways feeling a little unintuitive to navigate. I get all of that, I do. I also think that on a fundamental level, this map is the peak of what Hitman 3 represents. In a way, it's kind of the big boss fight of the World of Assassination trilogy, testing you on everything you've learned over the prior games and leaving your method entirely up to you. I kind of enjoy how little hand-holding there is in terms of the lack of selectable mission stories too. I've had many more moments of sheer chaos on this map as a result than I might have expected going into the level. In some playthroughs on other maps, it could sometimes feel like no matter how crazy your unguided gameplay might get, that it couldn't quite live up to the scripted capers of the opportunities. Here, that's not a problem. Your gameplay story is what's important, and I think there's something quite nice about Berlin foregrounding that. Of course, this is not to say that Berlin lacks any kind of scripted events, and the weird Easter eggs to be found here might be some of my favourite across the entire series. So if you blew past Berlin first time through in search of more conventional Hitman challenges, I'd implore you to go back and give it a fair shake. Not only will you be able to save some time by skipping the intro, but I'm willing to bet if you dig around, you'll find some stuff in there that you really happen to like. Continuing our globe-trotting adventure though, if Berlin's bustling club environment feels like the polar opposite of Dartmoor, then the next map, CHONGQING, continues in this tradition, just ditching the strobe lights in favour of relentless neon bombardment. CHONGQING is the map I think I saw the most of prior to the game's release in the trailers, and with good reason. What better way to show off the game's truly impressive new lighting system than a city lit so brightly that it tints the very night sky purple, with plenty of rain and wet streets for said light to reflect off of. With all the settings cranked, it is a sight to behold for sure. But again, with Hitman 3 taking the visual storytelling of the series to new heights, there's more than meets the eye here. With the talk of invading the ICA data storage facility and one of your targets dabbling with transhuman experimentation, you might expect some pristine, futuristic, technological cityscape. But what you find as you leave the train station is that this onslaught of neon lights is an attempt to blind you to the grim realities of the situation on the streets below. The residents of CHONGQING don't see any benefit of such a technologically focused society. Instead, they get a surveillance state where the pursuit of data trumps any kind of quality of life. Residential spaces are cramped, grey and run down. Drones monitor every move, and in one of the more harrowing setups for a Hitman mission, you find that the cybernetic experiments being run by your target to test the limits of the human brain are recruiting the local homeless as test subjects. These people are being promised riches for putting their lives, their minds in the hands of an amoral cyber terrorist running his back alley transhumanism tests out of a long dilapidated office building, its decay only broken up by the occasional futuristic pod that stands out like a sore thumb and seems to barely work. I adore the visuals here and how quickly it tears down this illusion of technological utopia, but were this all the map had to offer, I don't know if I would be so thrilled to actually play it. It's a highly vertical map, which I enjoy, but with all the buildings kind of looking and functioning the same, with the main challenge involving getting past low-level guards to climb the stairs and reach the top, most runs that didn't involve mission stories saw this part of the level devolve mostly into fairly cut-and-dry stealth action sequences, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but there was nothing about this approach that felt any more engaging than just taking the sniper rifle near the starting area and taking him out from across the map. For as much as this location was hyped up, it would seem as if gameplay-wise, it's fairly trivial. That is, until you discover the real secret of CHONGQING, the underground ICA facility you're really here for, where your other target patrols the data core you're trying to access, in order to delete your records and eliminate the organization in the process. This facility puts the many underground labs to be found in prior Hitman levels to absolute shame. It's a level unto itself, with a highly increased guard presence and a full multi-tiered access system for you to navigate, and multiple options at your disposal with which to do so. With security being as tight as it is, there's a real struggle and tension to just getting around here. In stark contrast to the streets, this really is the pristine cyber fortress you expect. It's bright, with lots of open space and guard sightlines at every angle, and so you'll likely have to flip between a combination of careful disguises, sneaking into areas in order to get the various keys you need for different levels of security, using the many ledges of the facility as a kind of jungle gym, and jumping into the many interconnected air vents on the fly, with almost every run seeing me take a different route to the target. There were chest-tensioning moments aplenty, where I'd unwittingly step into a security scan, for example, and hope to God it didn't flag something to alert the guards. And with your target being a behavioural scientist, she'll let you toy with the experiments she's running on her employees, leading to a fun timing puzzle that eventually culminates in a rather explosive finish. And after you and Olivia wipe the data core, the mission culminates in a slightly more scripted sequence in which several pathways are now closed off and every guard is now on shoot-to-kill orders, making for a fairly exhilarating getaway. It's fun, but similarly to Berlin, part of what makes this conclusion great is the fact that you don't have to do it every run. After you've destroyed the core the first time, simply taking out the targets on future playthroughs is enough, as Olivia tells you she can access the data remotely, I guess. You know, as long as I get to play my way, I'm not too fussed about the reasoning here. But what I really love about this mission is that there was nothing mentioned about this entire other level within CHONGQING in the run-up to release. That the scale of this facility is something you just stumble into. The ICA facility ends up adhering to the same mantra you've adopted the entire series. With such a technologically advanced environment housed underneath a freight container in a dingy alleyway, with even the locals commenting on how odd it is that so many service workers seem to be heading to their jobs in the wee hours of the night, the ICA are effectively hiding in plain sight. The streets of CHONGQING make for one of the most immediately eye-catching environments in the game, but exploring this section of the level doesn't make for the most exciting methods of play. That said, the fact that not only does this neon-drenched illusion hide a completely separate area of the map, but that said area is so mechanically fleshed out in itself easily raises CHONGQING to a personal favourite of mine. But you know, after all this experimentation with hiding levels within levels and shifting the hunter versus hunted dynamic and having you solve a murder mystery and take part in a Mission Impossible-esque cinematic spy thriller, it makes you wonder, what's wrong with a bit of normal Hitman every so often? Nothing, that's what, and luckily we're about to find that IO think the same, as we make our way to the penultimate location in this trilogy, Mendoza. It's strange, for me, when I think of this map, one of the most striking things I feel is nostalgia. Approaching the villa on the outskirts of the vineyard flooded my mind with memories of that opening level of Silent Assassin, albeit with a far greater civilian presence obviously. Hell, even the opportunity to interrupt the journalist reporting on the party at the start of the level felt like such a throwback to the opening of Paris in 2016's game. One of the first things you get to mess with in the entire trilogy, and arguably the key moment that let me know, yeah, this game has a sense of humour, I'm not playing wrong by doing this, and crucially, it seems like the developers are in on it. For such a seemingly insignificant moment, it kind of defined how I approached the rest of the series, and to see it represented almost beat for beat here seems like a pretty good indicator that the developers are bringing everything back around, so to speak. Because overall, this map is just classic Hitman through and through. There are no real gimmicks to be found here. It's IO Interactive doing what they do best, the ultimate culmination of those years spent working with this platform and knowing exactly what makes these kinds of levels tick, resulting in a mission I can only really describe as immensely enjoyable. In a way, it's actually one of the more difficult maps to talk about, because it hits all of those positive characteristics so well. It's a map with a number of functionally distinct areas, each presenting their own problems to solve in terms of navigation and disguise, with plenty of space and height between each, but also also all branching off from the centerpiece of what is IO's bread and butter at this point, a big party. It's a return to the simple 2-target mission, again with each requiring a different approach. Traversing the party is easy enough, and there are a number of convenient tufts of foliage to hide a body, for instance, if you can get your first target, Tamara Vidal, away from the eyes of the many guests or her attentive bodyguards. And heading to the villa where Don Yates makes his rounds, you're given some time to just take in how beautiful a map this is, with the orange sunset dousing everything in a warm haze, with plenty of plant life that both looks pretty and provides added cover for stealth approaches. You know, there's a great care to ensure that everything serves a gameplay function, as well as being just aesthetically pleasing. The security area is obviously one of the more difficult sections to get through unnoticed, but should you manage, this location provides excellent sightlines between the different parts of the map, allowing for those gloriously devilish opportunities to have someone else take out your target for you from a distance. On top of all that, more or less everything is connected to some branch of the underground cave layer, which itself leads to all sorts of nooks and crannies, as well as leading back out to the processing plant where the wine's made, which again, if you can figure out how to get your target alone, gives you some hilariously grisly methods with which to dispose of them. And given how far apart the targets are from one another, figuring out the different machinations involved in getting them together to take them out as one feels immensely satisfying. Even in the level's few mission stories, there are certain hurdles that don't present the automatic solutions you might expect from prior titles. It's just as I talked about at the beginning of this piece. You have to figure some things out for yourself, become acquainted with every part of the map, and improvise a little. This is Hitman at its most classically simple, but it's evolved slightly to really reward those most patient and observant players. There is one slightly vestigial element of this mission, and it's the inclusion of Diana as an entity on the map that you supposedly have to protect. Again, there are story reasons for this which we'll get onto, but at the end of the day, unless you pursue a certain not so obvious mission story, this inclusion in terms of gameplay doesn't realistically affect much more than, say, the Constant did in the final level of 2. Both missions require you to ensure that no harm comes to either party, but with both maps being so vast, and with regular enemies posing no risk to either safety, it's an objective that in both cases falls to the back of your mind. It might as well not exist. That said, at least here there isn't that daft kill switch they give you that renders you by far the biggest threat to the Constant's survival. And there is a mischievous fun to be had as you pass Diane escorting the target around the party, both knowing exactly who the other is and what they're planning, while all these guests remain blissfully unaware. But the fact that this is as much of a criticism as I can lay against the mission is indicative of just how much I enjoy Mendoza after all. It's so good, the Hitman formula working at its best, that Mendoza is what I like to think of as the final hurrah for the third game. But that's mainly because we now need to talk about the actual final level here, Carpathian Mountains, where my feelings are, not so kind. Look, if you've played Hitman 3 and you know anything about the kinds of things I value from this series, you know exactly what I'm going to say here. I think Carpathian Mountains is the worst level in the trilogy by some margin. The pride of Hitman to me has always been its ability to place the outcome of events entirely in your hands. There are so many variables at play, so many locations, each with their own distinct purposes, systems and sightlines governing them, as well as so many tools for you to mess with all of that it's surprisingly rare you'll get two players whose stories exactly match up. And for the final mission, the true ending point of this game, this world of assassination platform, the decision was made at some juncture to put you on a moving train, the goal being to get from one end to the other. A straight, narrow line that you've got no choice but to follow. And it's not even as if there's a great deal of choice as to how you get through each carriage. They're all so cramped, with a few tightly packed guards here and there, that it often feels like there's just one intended method to get through each scenario. Some carriages allow you to clamber up, avoiding the interior altogether, but even then you're limited by the Romanian frost coating the outside of the train in ways that represent a disappointingly distinct path for you to follow. You know, part of me thinks a train level in a Hitman game could work. like if there was more variety to the challenges beyond simply get past the guards. I'm envisioning carriages crowded with commuters, with you maybe having to escape from pursuing agents while also identifying and eliminating your target amongst the unassuming passengers, like with Mumbai or Berlin. But as it stands, the only real struggle comes from waiting for the gap between the rigid patrols to get to the next section of the train. Oh, and I guess when you're on the roof of a carriage, avoiding getting hit by the endless, predictable, daft signals. I mean, you can plainly see it from the greatly reduced challenge list here. There's just not a whole lot to this level. For context, these analyses usually see me doing at least 10 to 15 runs of each map. And yet here, I got the feeling I'd seen everything there was to see after just a few attempts. For the final send-off of this trilogy, Carpathian Mountains just seems so undercooked. But that's the thing, this map isn't really about the gameplay. In reality, Mendoza is the final true level of this thing. A massive party environment as a means of concluding the experience of Hitman 3. Carpathian Mountains, on the other hand, serves to wrap up the thing that I haven't really talked much about in these analysis videos, but I guess I have to make some mention of now, and that is the story. And look, I have never really cared about the sprawling tale IO Interactive have been telling over these three titles. Maybe it's down to the way these games were structured and put out. With such short cutscenes bookending 6 or so missions per game, with 2016's installment leaving months between each mission's release, it didn't seem like keeping players invested in every beat of the plot was really the focus of the developers either. The first game leaves us with a tale awkwardly told that starts not quite at the beginning and ends in the middle, with the second game progressing things slightly but also coming with the baggage that there was another game ahead and so stays in the middle, and now 3 comes along and has no choice but to rush everything to a conclusion it expects me to be way more invested in than I actually am. I'll tell you one thing I do like is the tone permeating the whole series. I enjoyed how 2 upped the schlock with a shadowy antagonist that spoke in such a cartoonishly evil voice that I could only laugh when he was on screen. I liked the gradual shift of Lucas Gray going from this relatively unnerving, unknown entity in the first game, feeling like a spectre who could take 47 out at any minute, to revealing his true nature in 2, resulting in the rest of their time together being spent as a globe-trotting buddy-buddy duo, and that someone as aloof and unflinching as 47 is part of that duo adds to the humour at its core. And there's something about the grander themes of the series, represented in this final mission, that I don't hate either. For example, there's a real darkness to the end, where upon confronting the Constant, you might decide to pick up the serum he offers you and inject him with it instead. Its implications are fairly significant. For one, it lends an extra layer of catharsis, a kind of poetic justice to 47's revenge, considering this complete erasure of identity and personality is what Providence forced both 47 and Lucas to endure. Further though, it also plays into the series' obsession with the notion of power, and its portrayal as this immovable force that's so shadowy and yet so all-encompassing that it can't be effectively combated or changed. And yet, the moment 47 jabs the Constant with that needle, power means nothing. You didn't even need to kill him. Suddenly the Constant as a symbol of all this evil and manipulation is just erased. In a way, it's almost bittersweet. You know, all of that came down to this. Power is just symbols, it would seem. But the actual details and convoluted plot of how these events and characters connect never did much for me at all, really. The closest I came to some kind of investment was with the reveal that 47 had actually killed Diana's parents when she was a child, but I wasn't invested for the reasons the game expected me to be, I imagine. More so, it just got me questioning how old 47 really is if he was an operative that far back when Diana was a kid. That, and this major cliffhanger from 2, ends up fairly underwhelming anyway, given the focus placed on the double or triple or quadruple crossing that occurs between Mendoza and Carpathian, between Diane and the Constant, that ultimately comes off feeling like this major plot point didn't matter nearly as much to the characters involved as you'd think it would. Ultimately, as much as I appreciate the effort to introduce a challenge of sorts to what amounts to unlocking a cutscene, it doesn't help to sell me on Carpathian Mountains either as a level or as the conclusion of this trilogy's story. Basically, if Hitman 2's mechanical inclusions ended up so insignificant that it didn't seem worth dedicating a lackluster intro level to them, then I don't think the world of Assassination's story was so gripping as to justify this lackluster final level. The stories I care about in Hitman have always been firmly attached to gameplay. They're in the unbelievably well-crafted and intricate mission stories, as scripted as they are. They're in those moments where 47 reveals himself to be a weird alien polymath, a nuclear engineer and tattooist and sommelier and drummer and DJ who has seemingly never set foot in a living room before. But what's perhaps a greater testament to IO's achievement with all of this, they're in the moments that I was allowed to create myself. Those stories of the dumb situations I would constantly get 47 into and laugh at as he maintained his unbreakable gaze, introducing a stoicism to these absurd scenarios that made them all the funnier. Those moments where the developers would let me get things comically wrong and force me to react to them. Hell, occasionally there would even be moments where things would go off without a hitch, and I'd think, man, that was cool, I did that. Hitman's gameplay allows for such insane flexibility that pretty much every person I've talked to about the game has their own winding tales about how each mission played out that are a joy to listen to, because often they revolve around aspects of maps or enemies that I had no idea existed. These stories I've exchanged with friends have made for some of my most cherished memories to do with games ever. In terms of emergent storytelling, in my mind, there really is no series quite like Hitman. And further, the story I care about the most is to do with the fact that we're even here at all, talking about the final installment of a trilogy that suffered through such a seemingly turbulent release, with reportedly poor sales and publisher drama that just seems so baffling considering the gem they were trying to get rid of, that from an outsider's perspective, it felt completely touch and go as to whether 2016's installment would get a sequel at all. Even despite a final level that left me decidedly underwhelmed, it doesn't undermine how ecstatic I was at that reveal that we'd be getting more Hitman in both 2018 and 2021. How joyous I felt that the geniuses at IO Interactive, and I don't use that word lightly, were going to get to complete their vision, and the triumph that the third installment has apparently sold really well. Finally, after all these years, the series is getting the respect it so obviously deserves. Hitman is not just one of my favourite series ever produced, it's become hugely important to me as a person. You know, 2016 was one of the first games I received press code for. It was the title that made all this channel stuff feel a bit more real to me, like there was a future in this weird endeavour. The videos I've been able to make as a result of these games have connected with such a wide range of people and covered a substantial period of my life. I mean, 5 years since that first game, I'm a different person to who I was back then. These recent Hitman titles are not just fantastic games. Over the last half-decade, they've come to shape the kinds of things I value in the medium, setting a bar of quality that shockingly few have even come close to touching. Basically, what I'm saying is thank you, IO, for producing such an unbelievable suite of games over the years. Whatever you do next from here, whether it be the James Bond game you are perfectly suited to make or whatever else, I cannot wait to go along on that ride. Whew, thank you so much for watching. This one's been a long time coming, I know, but you can finally stop asking me now. In all seriousness, I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, help me out by hitting the corresponding button and subscribing. Once again, check the Surfshark link in the description for the special offer I mentioned before, thanks to them for sponsoring the video. Also down there are links to my Twitch channel and podcast, which would be great if you checked out. Most importantly though, I'd like to thank my patrons here. Without you, there is zero chance I could ever justify putting the time and energy I do into massive projects like this. I cannot tell you how many hours and all-nighters I've pulled trying to get this thing ready. If you've enjoyed any of the videos I've put out and want to help the channel continue so I can keep making more, you can directly help out as well as get things like early access to ad-free video uploads and new patron-exclusive commentaries on my older videos by heading to patreon.com/writingongames and pledging only what you feel comfortable with. I am forever thankful for your support in whatever form it takes. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Artyom Vitsyuk, Nicholas Villeneuve, Captain Knusprig, Ruth Natman, Leah Chinello, Henry Mielek, Bryce Snyder, Lucas, David Björk, Winter, Timothy Jones, Jordan Midler, Hebe Amori, The Nameless Guy, Tommy Carver Chaplin, Dr. Motorcycle, Shardfire, Rob, Max Cohen, Jesse Ryan, Spike Jones, Dallas Keane, Charlie Kimball, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.